Hi everybody, I am going to talk about the issues of gender and disability. About 10% of the world's population live with disabilities and frequently encounter countless physical and social obstacles. Persons with disability often lack the opportunities of the mainstream population and are usually among the most marginalized in society. Of the persons with a disability, particularly women, face barriers to full equality and advancement because of such factors as race, age, language, ethnicity, culture, religion, or disability. Women with disabilities face significantly more difficulties in both public and private spheres in attaining access to adequate housing, health, education, vocational training, and employment, and are more likely to be institutionalized. Persistence of certain cultural, legal, and institutional barriers makes women and girls with disability the victims of twofold discriminations, one as women and the other as persons with disability. At the end of this talk, you will understand the gender perspective related to disability, know the major areas of gender disparities, and learn the role of social workers and civil society in addressing the issues of gender and disability. Let me first describe the challenges faced by women and girls with disability. People with disability are often treated as asexual, genderless human beings. However, women with disability and men with disability have different life experiences due to biological, psychological, economic, social, political, and cultural attributes associated with being female and male. Patterns of disadvantage are often associated with the differences in the social position of women and men. The World Bank report on reproductive health and disability in 2011 indicates that female disability prevalence rate is 19.2%, whereas it is 12% for men. Every minute, more than 30 women are seriously injured or disabled during labor. The global rate of literacy is as low as 3% for all adults with disability and 1% for women with disability. Although all persons with disability face barriers to employment, men with disability have less difficulty in getting employed than women with disability. Women and girls with disability experience higher rates of gender-based violence, sexual abuse, neglect, maltreatment, and exploitation than women and girls without disability. Women and girls with disability are 3 times more likely to experience gender-based violence compared to non-disabled women and girls. Unfortunately, little attention is given to the situation of 500,000 women and girls with disabilities in the world, despite the evidence that they are more likely to experience violence than their peers without disabilities. Girls and women of all ages with any form of disability are among the more vulnerable and marginalized sections of the society. It is imperative, therefore, to take into account and to address their concerns in all policy making and programming. Special measures are needed at all levels to integrate them into the mainstream of development. Often, women with a disability are invisible both among those promoting the rights of persons with a disability and those promoting gender equality and the advancement of women. The integration of women with disability in the development framework must be reinforced. While all human rights development norms and standards apply to women and girls with disability, they have not enjoyed the full rights on an equal basis with others. For very long, women and girls with disability have been invisible both to the advocates of women's rights and of disability rights, and this has increased their vulnerability. Women and girls with disability are likely to experience the double discrimination, which includes the gender-based violence, abuse, and marginalization. As a result, women with disability often must feel additional disadvantages even in comparison to men with disability and the women without disability. Women and girls with disability experience a number of gender-based discriminations and exclusions in the field of education, employment opportunities, housing facilities, health services. Let me explain each one of these major areas one by one. First, education. Gender disparities also exist in education. In the male-dominated Indian society, women are given less priority in the key areas of education. Moreover, the educational institutions lack adequate infrastructure required for including children in the mainstream education. Educational institutions lack basic facilities such as disabled-friendly sanitary latrine, ramps and handrails, and teaching learning aids. Absence of this barrier-free environment in educational institutions leads to social exclusion of persons with disability. Girls with disability are more affected than the boys with disability. According to the report on the implementation of the World Programme of Action concerning the disabled, less than 5% of children and young persons with disability have access to education and training, and girls and young women face significant barriers in participating in social life and development. It is also to note that cultural barriers give priority to boys than girls in matters of education. As a result, girls with disability are denied the opportunities of education, but boys are given preference over girls. The rate of school dropout among the girls with disabilities is higher than the boys due to the gender discrimination against girls and also lack of barrier-free sanitary facilities in schools. While the overall literacy rate for persons with disability is 3%, UNESCO estimates that it is just 1% for women and girls with disability. Next, employment and paid work. Unemployment rates are the highest among women with disability. The United Nations organizations estimates that 75% of women with disability are unemployed, and women with disability who are employed often earn less than their male counterparts and women without disability. People with disability in general face difficulties in entering the open labor market, but from a gender perspective, men with disability are almost twice as likely to have jobs as women with disability. When women with disability work, they often experience unequal hiring and promotion standards, unequal access to training and retraining, unequal access to credit and other productive resources, unequal pay for equal work, and occupational segregation, and they rarely participate in economic decision making. Persons with disability are not encouraged by the employers to engage into specific tasks. Their skills are underestimated, and denied opportunities to perform certain tasks. Thus, women are given less consideration in matters of employment and paid work than the men with disability. Next, health. Women with disability of all ages often have difficulty with physical access to health services. Women with mental disability are particularly vulnerable, while there is limited understanding in general of the broad range of risks to mental health to which women are disproportionately susceptible as a result of gender discrimination, violence, poverty, armed conflict, displacement, and other forms of social deprivation. Next, housing. Women with disability face significant barriers in accessing adequate housing and related services. Most of the women with disability do not get married as a result of their disabling condition. They continue to live with their parents. Soon after the expiry of parents, the household things are being managed by those persons who are non-disabled, and they in turn discriminate the persons with a disability. Hence, housing is a great barrier to women than men with disabilities. Risks of abuse and violence force women to become institutionalized. More number of women with disability, therefore, are institutionalized than men. Lack of barrier-free infrastructure in the habitations is yet another hindrance to persons with disability, and this factor affects women with disability more than man. Let me discuss the issues of gender for girls with disability. The majority of women with disabilities in India suffer the triple discrimination of being female, being disabled, and being poor. Indeed, not only are they a socially invisible category, but their plight is worse than both men with disability and other non-disabled women. Being powerless, isolated, and anonymous, they are extremely vulnerable to abuse and violence. There is no specific disability law which mentions that women as a category require special attention. The 11th plan observes that women with disability are considered as a financial burden and social liability by their families. They are denied movement outside their home and access to education. Moreover, they are viewed as asexual, helpless, and dependent, and as a result, they are isolated and neglected with no home of a normal life. It is a fact that the women and girls with a disability often belong to the most excluded groups of people in developing countries. In facing discrimination based both on their gender and disability status, they are compelled to deal with greater extremes of poverty. They may face severe problems in fulfilling their basic needs such as shelter, food, safe water, sanitation, health services, education, and employment opportunities. Overall, women with a disability are often left out of decision-making processes, including decisions that are about them. Women and girls with a disability endure violence, abuse, and exploitation twice as often as non-disabled women over a longer period of time, and experience more serious injuries as a result of violence. Violence against women and girls is one of the most pervasive and harmful manifestations of gender inequality. Worldwide, women and girls with a disability experience higher rates of gender-based violence, sexual abuse, neglect, maltreatment, and exploitation than women without disability, including forced sterilization, sexual assault, being denied the right to a family, physical and sexual violence from a wide range of persons. In addition, women and girls with disability face extreme and significant barriers in escaping violence, reporting crimes, and accessing justice. The extensive physical, attitudinal, and communication barriers women and girls with disability face include social stigma and isolation, discriminatory practices based on gender and disability, inaccessible physical environment, lack of accessible communication, myths about perceived asexuality, lack of access to education and reproductive health services, all reduce their options for a just and compassionate response to prevent and eliminate violence, abuse, and exploitation of women and girls with disability. Violations occur in homes and institutions perpetrated by family members, neighbors, teachers, and caretakers. In some settings, it may even include state-sanctioned reproductive rights violations such as forced sterilization. Let me mention the United Nations Organization's Convention and the related documents. The United Nations Organization states that women report higher rates of disability than men. In practical terms, this means that poor women with disability are at greater risk of experiencing multiple forms of discrimination as well as poverty. The estimated literacy rate for women with disability is 1% compared to about 3% of people with disability as a whole. Only 25% of women with disability worldwide are employed compared to 50% of men with disability. The preamble to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities states that women and girls with disability often face additional risk of violence. A survey from Odisha in India found that every woman and girl with a disability surveyed had been beaten at home, while 25% of women and girls with learning disabilities had been raped, and 6% of women with a disability were forcibly sterilized. However, there is no consistent data available on the status of women and girls with a disability. For that reason, the World Health Organization resolution on disability, including prevention, management, and rehabilitation, calls on its member states to collect gender disaggregated statistics on disability in different sectors. According to the United Nations Population Fund Report 2003, every year 20 million women experience disability and long-term complications due to lack of access to appropriate antenatal care. Women and girls with disability face multiple discriminations and are therefore less likely to have access to services, education, and employment, and to participate in decision-making processes. This disenfranchisement can serve to aggravate their poverty and dependence upon others. Development programs that improve access to resources and services not only strengthen the independence and dignity of persons with a disability, but also release those individuals charged with their care. It is often girls that are taken out of school to support their relatives. Improved maternal health care given to women during and after pregnancy will reduce the number of women becoming disabled as a result of childbirth and decrease the economic consequences of disability, both in the women giving birth and the decreased number of children experiencing disability through abnormal pre- or perinatal events. The fourth United Nations World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995 resulted in the platform of action that addresses women with disability concerns in several paragraphs and urges governments and civil society to integrate women with disability in policy decisions and in programs. The United Nations Organization Convention on the Rights of People with Disability includes gender mainstreaming on multiple discrimination of women and girls with disability, and it calls on member states to develop policies accordingly. The countries, including India, which participated in this convention, acknowledged the existence of multiple forms of discrimination for women and girls with disability and affirmed its dedication to promote gender equality. One of the targets of the Millennium Development Goals is gender equality, but it does not mention women and girls with disability explicitly. However, the targets apply to all women and girls and can only be reached by including women and girls with disability who often belong to the poorest sections of the society and are particularly likely to be subjected to violence and abuse. The rights of persons with disability are grounded in a broad human rights framework based on the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenants on Human Rights, and other human rights instruments. On 13th December 2006, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability and the optional protocol to the Convention came into force on 3rd May 2008. The text of the Convention contains an article on women with disability as well as several references to girls, women, and gender issues. The preamble in this article states that it is concerned about the difficult conditions faced by persons with disabilities who are subject to multiple or aggravated forms of discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic, indigenous or social origin, property, birth, age, or other status. It recognizes that women and girls with disabilities are often at greater risk of violence, injury or abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment or exploitation both within and outside the home. It emphasizes the need to incorporate a gender perspective in all efforts to promote the full enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedom by persons with disability. Article 3 is about the general principle of the Convention, namely equality between men and women. Article 6 is concerned about women with disability. It states that parties recognize that women and girls with disability are subject to multiple discriminations and in this regard shall take measures to ensure the full and equal enjoyment by them of all their human rights and fundamental freedom. Parties shall take all appropriate measures to ensure the full development, advancement, and empowerment of women for the purpose of guaranteeing them the exercise and enjoyment of the human rights and fundamental freedom set out in the present Convention. Some of the other references to women and gender issues are found in the other articles in the report of the Convention, such as awareness raising, freedom from exploitation, violence and abuse, adequate standard of living, and social protection. Let me now state the role of social workers. Despite all these legal measures made available in the Constitution of India, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Persons with Disabilities Act, National Trust Act, the gap existing in terms of issues of gender and disabilities are widening. The legal measures need to be tightened and strictly implemented in order to facilitate an equal and inclusive order in the society. The role of social workers is very important in the process of inclusion and mainstreaming the lives of disabled women with equal access. Social workers have to play the role of a facilitator, an advocate, or educator in preventing issues of gender between the persons with the disability and the society. They need to continuously provide education to every member in the society on this inclusive development through equal access to all. Let me sum up. About 10% of the world's population live with disabilities and frequently encounter countless physical and social obstacles. Women with disabilities face significantly more difficulties in both public and private spheres in attaining access to adequate housing, health, education, vocational training, and employment, and are more likely to be institutionalized. Patterns of disadvantage of women with disability are often associated with the differences in the social position of women and men. Women and girls with disability are likely to experience gender-based violence, abuse, and marginalization. Women and girls with disability experience a number of gender-based discriminations and exclusions in the field of education, employment opportunities, housing facilities, health services, and so on. The majority of women with a disability in India suffer the triple discrimination of being female, being disabled, and being poor. The fourth United Nations World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995 resulted in the platform of action that addresses women with disability concerns in several paragraphs and urges governments and civil society to integrate women with disability in policy decisions and in programs. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disability includes gender mainstreaming on multiple discrimination of women and girls with disability, and it calls on member states to develop policies accordingly. Despite all these legal measures made available in the Constitution of India, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Persons with Disabilities Act, National Trust Act, the gaps in terms of issues of gender and disabilities are widening. The role of social work professionals is very important in the process of inclusion and mainstreaming the lives of disabled women with equal access. Let me sign off now and hope to see you in another session. Thank you.